Hello my friends. Today I would like to show you how to install Kubernetes cluster at home on your existing equipment. And you don't need to have something pretty powerful, just get something old or just pretty normal computer, or you can even install this on virtual machine on your computer. What we are going to install? It will be Kubernetes cluster based on the Ubuntu 18 version. It's pretty stable version. And our goal to have at home Kubernetes laboratory, which will have in the end for the persistent disk, it will have local path provisioner. So it will let us to install software into the Kubernetes cluster, and it will automatically create the persistent disk for the pods, and basically we will be able to install it. For ingress, we will use Nginx ingress controller with options for bare metals, because we are going to use node port for forwarding traffic. We will install cert manager. It will be JStack with provider Road 53. And as the demo application, we will use Concourse CI/CD pipeline manager. And as the load balancer, we will use HA proxy in the TCP mode. So, and in the end, the cool things of this installation will be this: the lab will allow people to connect to the software which will be deployed, and in this case it will be Concourse by IPv6. So we will use a URI which will be forward our request to the IPv6 address. And let's briefly talk about our environment. So we will have one single virtual machine based on ESXi host, and we don't need to have so much resources for that. It will be free CPU and 4 gigabytes of RAM. Yeah, for our installation it will be sufficient, but in the end, in the future, then we will need to install something additionally. For example, in the next video, I will show you how to install AWX and provision this. Definitely, we will need to add additional resources like CPU and memory. And as you can see, the user from the internet will be able to type in the browser something like ci.devops6.com. It's our test URI. And this request will be resolved to the external IP address, which will be binded on HA proxy and our HA proxy will build it in the dual stack. And the HA proxy will forward the request into the ingress node ports for HTTP and HTTPS. Apart of that, we will have cert manager inside, Concourse, and local provisioner. What I would like to say here, in my case, I have two different storages: SSD, fast disk, and traditional SSD disk. So for local path provisioner, I will use the slow disk. That's why in my example, I will create additional hard drive, which will be attached to the virtual machine, and this drive will be used for new ports. And to be able to create green certificates for our software, because we don't want to see all the time this warning message that your certificate is not valid, we would like to use AWX as the DNS provider. Especially, we would like to use the special pair of solution like cert manager, which will be use provider Road 53 as the verification component, which will let us to create for free green certificates. Okay, let's start the installation process. In my case, we are going to use ESXi host. So let's create the new virtual machine. Let's set the name, set the operation system. It will be Ubuntu Linux. Next. Let's create the disk. So, as I said, we will use free CPU, 4 GB of RAM. Let's create 20 GB for the first disk, and let's create the second drive. Here I will use the slow storage, and I will allocate 200 GB for that. Looks good. Finish. Now next step would be to run the virtual machine, and we will need to change the parameters because we need to insert the virtual CT. I have it here. Okay, I am trying to do it fast, and now okay, install Ubuntu. Okay, I will speed up the process. Okay, good. Now we have just fresh installed Ubuntu server, and we know the IP address which we can use for login. But by the way, we need to prepare our AWS account. We need to create a special policy, and we will need to create the user which will be used by Cert Manager. So let's open the AWS console, go to the IMI and open the policy, and click policies, then click create policy, and select the JSON tab, and put here the template, view policy. Let's set the name like cert-manager. By the way, all this information, all these examples you will find in the text documentation in my GitHub repository. I will keep the link in the description for this video. So let's move forward, create policy. And now next step will be to create the user. Let's add user and set the username like, again, let's use the same Cert Manager. We are going to provide only programmatic access, and we're going to directly attach the policy here, Cert Manager, and let's set the full path, this one, tag, skip it, review, and create user. Since we are going to use this through REST API, let's download the credentials to the file, and next time we will go back to the AWS account just to verify how the Cert Manager works. So the rest process will be in the terminal. Let's open the terminal and log in into the server. So the first step would be to set the static IP address on the server. That's why we'll open the follow configuration file. I basically already predefined this part of the configuration file in the documentation. So I'm going to just pass the data into the file. So in my case, the primary IP address will be 0.10 and the secondary IP address will be .11. And by the way, this IP address will be IPv6, and this is public IP address, and we are going to use exactly this IP address for reaching this server from the outside. Okay, let's save the data and reboot the server. It takes only a few seconds, and as you know, we will need to log in into the different IP address. Okay, we are already there. We just log in, and what we are going to do next, we are going to generate SSH keys there, because it will be used by the Kubernetes installer. So let's produce the key, and now let's copy this public key to the same server, and let's copy authorized key from the Ubuntu user to the root user. Done. Next step will be to prepare the operation system level. We need to run the upgrade. It's a required procedure, and then it will be done. We will need to install virtual environment. Since we are going to run the Ansible inside the kubespray, because the Ansible, this is the engine for the installer, and this is very, very important to create the virtual environment rather than try to install all these packages to the system itself. So in this case, we will be able to completely remove all folders, subfolders, or even remove the Ubuntu user in the end and clean up the space. And yeah, that and use it. This. Okay, let's install additionally the virtual environment components. And then it will be done very quickly. We will create the virtual environment. We will call it Ansible. Let's wait a few moments, and 1, 2, 3. Okay, almost done. 1, 2, 3. Done. So we create the virtual environment, and we will need to activate it. Okay, we are inside. As you can see, this is the name of the virtual environment. It's Ansible. Perfect. By the way, we need to prepare the disk which will be used for local path provisioning. So let's log in into the server under the root, and here we will need to prepare the disk. To do that, we will need to create the file system on it. It looks a bit complicated, but please don't be scared about that. So the main steps, we could create the file system. It takes for a while, just a few seconds. Then we create the special variable which will store in the memory the UUID of the disk. This command. Then we will create the directory for local path provisioner. Next step will be the mounting itself, and in the end we will store the UUID to the fs tabbed file. In this case, this partition will be mounted automatically each time that the server will be reloaded. Next step, let's clone my special examples repository. Yeah, sorry, I already did it. And next step will be to clone the kubespray. By the way, let me remove it before. So this is the cloning process. Okay, we are there. Let's change directory to the kubespray. And now that's why we have the Ansible virtual environment. Now we will install the all requirements component into the virtual environment, and we will not install all this Python modules into the root system. This is very, very important. And now we need to follow the official kubespray instruction, we need to execute few steps which will prepare the inventory, which will be stored in the my cluster folder, and then we will declare the IP address of our server, and then we will produce the configuration file, which will be basically our inventory file. Next step will be we would like to rename the server name inside the inventory. If we will have a look in this file, just for your information, you will see that this is the inventory for the Ansible, which will install the Kubernetes cluster. You will see that's the name of the server. Next step will be to finally run the installation process. To do that, we will run this long command, which we basically will run Ansible playbook by using this inventory, and this is basically according to the instruction. And we are going to activate the local path provision, by the way. Okay, let's run it. The installation process will take few minutes, depending on the power of your machine where you are running your virtual machine inside. So I will speed up the process. Super. We successfully installed Kubernetes cluster. Next step. So let's make the directory, the hidden directory kube in our home directory, because to be able to manage our Kubernetes cluster inside the Ubuntu user, we need to copy the configuration file, which was basically generated under the root user to our Ubuntu user folder. Okay, we are there. We did it. And by the way, if you run, for example, kube control get all -o all, we'll see everything which exists here. By the way, let's make some small tuning. Since we are not going to have right now more than one master in the cluster, my personal proposal would be to remove the DNS autoscaler and scale the deployment for core DNS from 2 replicas to 1 replicas. Just decrease the load in the server. Next step will be to install Helm. And by the way, we are going to install version 3. So follow my instruction. Let's prepare the repository again. And don't forget to update the Helm repo. And let's basically install the Helm. Okay, done. Now, next step, we need to install Ingress, special for bare metal installation, because in this case we will use Node port. Next step will be to install Cert Manager. We will prepare the namespace. We'll create this. We will add the Helm repo. We will update it, and yeah, we will install it. We will install Cert Manager. Okay, done. And now the time to finally switch into the example repository. We are there. And here we will need to create the secrets based on the information which was created in the AWS. To run this, to do this, I will create the secret. By the way, it's very important to create the secret inside Cert Manager namespace. And now we need to create the Azure, cluster Azure. This is the file, and we are going to update it. I already prepared the new content of the file based on my data. So This is the real key, and we are going to use solver DNS01 for Let's Encrypt. Okay, we saved this issue, and now we need to create this object in the Kubernetes cluster. Done. Good. So next step will be to install Concourse. Again, we are going to use Helm, update the repo, and yeah, by the way, I prepared the special file which contain the example. In my case, I hard-coded here my information about my domain, CI net DevOps X. This is just an example. And yeah, install the Concourse. Sorry, small glitch. We need to prepare. We need to create a create namespace Concourse, and then the run code. Perfect. Okay, now I think we should check what's going on in the Kubernetes cluster. Control, let all, a lot of things in process. Right now, we will see that the Kubernetes, not Kubernetes, the Concourse software under the installation. It takes some time, but in the meanwhile, let's prepare the HA proxy. And we will store this data in the editor file because we will need it to configure the HA proxy. To do this, let's jump into the root, and we will install the HA proxy. Good, done. Next step will be to to add additional configuration into the file. And in our case, we will need to add information about our node ports. So for the backend HTTP, we will need to put the data from the node port regarding port 80. In this case, will be this one. I will show you a bit later where I got this information. And for HTTPS, it will be this one. Let's store this, and if we will scroll up, you will see this data. I got it from this list, from this line. So as you can see, you will have different TCP ports because this is random ports. And don't forget to restart the HA proxy. Done. Okay, good. Now let's start to debug our system. First of all, let's check how many services are running. So all is up, all is ready. Perfect. And now the very important thing is to check the certificates. Let's go back to the AWS. I think that it's still in the progress. And open our zone and check if our process creates the temporary record here. It's not here. Okay, let's go back to the terminal and check kube control -n. Let's specify the Concourse and then get certificate. It's already true. So it was pretty fast. It means that the certificate was successfully created by Cert Manager and it was pretty quick. And now, if you will type here the ci.netdevops.com, ta-da! Cool. So we was forwarded automatically to our Kubernetes application, and if you will check the certificate, you will see the path. It was provided by Let's Encrypt, and this is the certificate itself. So as you can see, this is green, it works, there are no warnings, there's something bad, and we didn't change the default password, so technically you can authenticate yourself here, test, login, and it's done. So here you are. So let's go back to the slides and what we basically did. So we successfully installed HA proxy and Kubernetes cluster, which uses the cert manager to interact with the Route 53 to produce, to create the special records, temporary records, which will prove your rights to your domain, and it will automatically let Let's Encrypt to issue the certificates, and that's why we've got this green certificate, and then we will be able to open the page of the concourse. So as you can see, it works pretty easy, and yeah, it's cool, it's really cool. In next video I will show you how to install AWX into your Kubernetes server by using the concourse. We are going to create pipeline which will do this for you. It will install AWX software into the Kubernetes cluster, and it will provision the configuration automatically. So I hope that you liked this video, and I really want to see you next time. Thank you for watching. See you next time.